Hi, I'm Lauren Joe at NameMyBusiness.co, and in this video, I want to talk to you about overlay readings and overlay charts and what does that mean. So if you're familiar with astrology, then an overlay is going to be very similar to a synastry chart, especially when we are looking at the charts of two different people. So if you don't know for astrology and synastry, you can take two different people's natal charts, look at them together, and get an idea of some of the challenges that might come up in that relationship or what that relationship and that the dynamic between those two people might be like. So in an overlay chart, we are looking at the relationship between names. And there's really two categories for an overlay. That's going to be for an individual and different names that they have had in their lifetime, or different names that they go by in their day-to-day life, as well as the category of looking at relationships between people, where we take the different names a person has and the different names another person has, and we look at all of those together. So within an individual person, again, there's a couple different reasons a person might have multiple names or overlays in their chart. So very commonly, if someone gets married or changes their name legally for whatever reason, this is going to create an overlay. But additionally, even if you've never changed your name before, your name is still legally now what it was when you were born. Maybe you don't go by your full, or for most people, they don't necessarily go by the full name on their birth certificate in their day-to-day life. I'm a person like that. I still have my same name. My name legally has never changed. And I don't have much variation even in the name that's my legal birth name and the name I use in the day-to-day. The only difference is that middle name's not being included. How I'm known by my friends or at work, a lot of people might not even know what my middle name is, but it's still present there on all my legal documents. Another example, there's someone has a different name, what we might call a common use name, is they have a name that commonly gets shortened, such as Christina being Chrissy or Christy or some variation thereof. Same with Nicole being Nick or Nikki. So a person may be Samantha at work, and that's how everyone at work knows them. That's how professionally they're known. But in their day-to-day life, everyone calls them Sam. Or it could be that a person just, since they were very young, has used that variation of their name. They're like, no one except my mom calls me Jessica. Everyone in my life calls me Jess, right? So there are these different instances why a person might not be using the full name on their birth certificate. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at those different charts, whether, again, that's an instance of people at work know you by your first name, people at home know you by your middle name, or some variation thereof. And we're going to take a look at those different charts to see, when we look at it together, what patterns are arising and what story that starts to tell us. And then similarly, we're going to take all of the names for one person, and if we're looking at their relationships with another person, we're going to take all the names of that other person and we're going to start to compare them. Quite often what we'll do, and oftentimes for ease, is we might just look at the birth certificate names for both of the people as a place to start. And then if we're wanting to go deeper, we might take a look at the overlays to see what other layers are getting added in when we start to look at that. So without further ado, let me pull up my screen, be able to show you what this looks like. And so I chose as an example Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher. Since they are mother and daughter, I thought it would be interesting to look at them as a way of talking about just what are a couple of things that we're looking at for an overlay name or in an overlay reading. And let me also say one more thing before jumping in. There's an analogy that my teacher likes to use that I think is wonderful, and that has to do with your birth name. If you were to think about a cake, your birth name, like a large cake, fancy, like a wedding cake, your birth name is the name. It is the core, it is the base of this cake. But every name change over time, again, whether it's through a variation of a sort of nickname or through marriage or just a name change, these become the nuts that you add in, becomes the frosting that you put on top, the decorations that you're adding. It's layers that get added on to give us a fuller picture. So here we are. We have Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher's charts. For Debbie Reynolds, you can see her birth name was Mary Frances Reynolds. And for Carrie Fisher, she has more of that classic dynamic of the name that she's known by is her birth name, but the middle name is missing. And Debbie has kind of very classic, especially for actresses at that time, her name was changed for Hollywood, essentially, to have that stage name. And also with celebrities, what tends to happen often is because they have this stage name, if you will, this well-known name that they're known to as the world, they're not necessarily changing that when they get married, or if they do, it's only legally, but most people are still going to just know them as that name that they became famous with. So what can we see here in these charts? What would I be looking at? So there's two main things that I'm going to look at when I'm looking at an overlay chart, and that's either just on an individual level or between people, and that's going to be clashes and locks. And so a clash happens when your karmic numbers are the same. So that's either within your own, as an individual, within your birth name to a name change, one of your overlay names, that the karma is the same number, or the goals are the same number. So when this happens in karma, it's a karmic clash. And when this happens in goals, it's a goal clash. So we're going to look for clashes in the charts, and this could happen again in your name as an individual. There can be a clash, or between two people, there can be a clash. So we're looking for clashes either in karma, when the karma is the same, or when the goals are the same. And this would have to be in the same triangle. So specifically, the physical karma is the same for that person or between the two people. The spiritual goals specifically was the same between the two people or the individual and their names. Now with this, when it comes to combination numbers, it can just clash on that single digit. It doesn't have to be that it's 11-2 and 11-2. You could have an 11-2 and a 22, and that 2 is still clashing because the 2 is still the same. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same when it's the combination. Whichever number is the same, that clash is occurring there. So a lock is when, again, either within your own name, within those two charts, or with the other person's chart, the two people, there is a talent that corresponds to either a karmic aspect or that goals aspect. So again, this would be either a karmic lock or a goal lock. And again, this is going to need to be within the same triangle. So having a physical talent that corresponds to a spiritual goals does not create a lock, the same way having a physical goal that's the same as the other person's spiritual goal does not create a clash. And so what do these mean, right? Well, clash can probably tell just by that word alone. With both of these, I should say, the reason that we're looking at them is that it typically tells us that that energy is being worked on, it's getting focused, there's being an emphasis on that energy that either has the clash or the lock, but it's just about how easy is that lesson and the learning that's going on there. So again, with the clash, right, already just the sound of that word, it insinuates kind of a bit of a butting heads. This is a more friction. If you think about it, I don't even like to say positive and negative, but the unhealed, the more challenging lessons of that number, bringing that out and bring it up to the surface. So again, it's coming to the surface for the hopes of learning, leading into the lesson, learning the lesson, overcoming the challenge and learning the lesson. That's the hope. But when it's a clash, you just might not be learning it in a way that's very comfortable. There could just be friction either between the relationship between those people. It just causes friction. Or at the time that your name changed, you just noticed those themes coming up more, and it was challenging, right? Whereas when you have a lock, when it's the talent that's then corresponding into the goal or karma, it's just a softer experience. I like to describe this sometimes as energetically sending someone the cheat codes on how to work through that energy. Because, and if you watch my video, I'll explain the birth chart. I use the analogy of your talents are the tools that you have to work through your challenges, be that the karmic aspects or the goals aspects. And sometimes we don't even necessarily know how to use the talent. It's the tools that are in our tool belt, or the tools that we have are not the best for the challenge that we're facing. So when we either take on a new name or a different iteration of our name, or another person comes into our life and brings that talent, brings the tool that we need to overcome that challenge, it's like energetically on it. Again, this is going to be on an energetic subconscious level. It's like they're teaching us how to use that tool. It's like they're giving us the instruction manual on, hey, here's what the tool is, here's how you use it, here's how you can work through this energy. And when I say that this can be a subconscious and energetic level, means that even if the person consciously hasn't even worked through that energy themselves, if they have the talent in their chart, then energetically they hold that tool. And so they can energetically teach you, even if on a conscious level, they wouldn't be able to teach you how to overcome that because they're still working it out themselves. So that is really the basics of understanding a overlay charts. How, again, this is applicable just within a person in their own name or within relationships between people. So looking at Carrie Fisher as an example, she has spiritual karmic lock in her name, as she has 11-2 in both of those aspects, the spiritual karma of her birth name and her common use name, her known name, Carrie Fisher. She has 11-2 there. Whereas it's very interesting that I did end up using this example of mother and daughter, and you're seeing that on the physical karma, they have double karmic clash with each other. Also, did I say lock before? Karmic clash, spiritual karmic clash, in case I didn't say that. So between Debbie Reynolds and her daughter, Carrie Fisher, they have in their birth names, you're seeing a clash of the 7-7 physical karma. And in their overlay names, you're seeing the clash of the 10-1 physical karma. So that's a very interesting relationship and or dynamic, I should say, to the relationship. And I mean, it's definitely interesting, again, with using celebrities, because we know a little bit about their relationship, or at least we would think that we do. It definitely seems like they had overall a more positive relationship, but also who knows what's going on behind those closed doors. And you can energetically have these clashing energies, and it doesn't necessarily affect the relationship on a surface level. It just depends, right? So the energy can come up. The 7, for example, is about a heart wound. So they could press on each other's heart wounds, but that could actually bring them closer together because they're sharing that experience. So who knows? And you can also see that in the spiritual karma, in the spiritual triangle, I should say, they do have some locks going on. We're seeing specifically where Carrie Fisher in spiritual talents of her Carrie Fisher, her known name, that 7-7 is creating a karmic lock to her mom, Debbie Reynolds' spiritual karma that's there. So they have within their dynamic, and interesting again that it's the 7, that on the physical side, the physical triangle, those 7s are clashing, but on the spiritual triangle, it creates a lock. And Debbie Reynolds, actually in that name, she carries her own lock of the 16-7, creating that lock to the 7-7. So it's actually an interesting little pattern to see there. Well, that's should give you a good idea of what to look for. And again, if you are having a reading coming up with me, one of the reasons I want you to understand what's going on with the overlays is because we're going to want to look at the overlays of your names to see, again, what energies, what stories those are telling us as part of the reading that we'll be doing. So hope to see you soon.